Hey Wargamers, today I want to talk about commanders in the Tau Empire Codex and how it's kind of weird we don't have a stealth commander. Not really. So in the Codex as it is, there are different archetypes of commanders. And what I mean by that is that if we look at the Enforcer or the Cold Star or Farsight or Shao Sun, they all have kind of a different idea of what they do, right? They have different roles, they have different war gear to accomplish those roles, right? And so if we look at the generic commanders, the Enforcer and the Cold Star, we see that they have, basically defensive or offensive roles respectively. An Enforcer is a defensive unit because it gives that, AP mitigation to its unit. A Cold Star is more offensive because it makes them move faster and gives them assault, so they're better able to utilize the weapons that they have. And so it makes sense that these two units, the Enforcer and the Cold Star, are kind of like the main commanders in the army, right? Like we can either be more shooty, or we can be more defensive, we can be more aggressive or more defensive, right? And so these commanders complement the Crisis Suit unit in terms of their role, but also in terms of the abilities of the different Crisis Suit units. The anti-tank role of things like the Sunforge, or the anti-infantry of things like Starscythe. These work with all of those, right? Those are all useful in any of those circumstances. And so, like, Games Workshop has done a really nice job building these archetypes so that you can mix and match your commanders with your Crisis Suit units to do a variety of different things. But then they've also included Farsight and Shao Sun as ways of adding a little bit extra spice, a little extra seasoning to your army, right? And these are also, I think, well designed in the way that Farsight gives a very limited benefit to your army in terms of, giving you a one-off commander that can boost a Crisis unit to be better at close range. This is a little bit off-brand for Tau. So there's this whole thing where Farsight lets you do this in a limited sense. And again, it makes sense with the lore, it makes sense with how Crisis Suit units play, that this is how Farsight is constructed. And then Shao Sun, as the Supreme Commander, also has lots of benefits that kind of are more generalist support for your army. And this really does make sense for her, her lore, and also for, just having a centerpiece commander for the army, right? And so this all really works out well. But the thing about Shao Sun, too, is that she is a stealth commander, and they don't really lean into that very much with her, role. Yes, they give her stealth and lone operative, and they just kind of make her a little bit more durable in ways of like the guardian drone and stuff. But that's kind of where the stealth lore ends. You don't see her doing a lot of things with stealth suits, for example, which you might expect in a more kind of mainstream generic stealth commander, right? She is her own character, and they've imbued her with these qualities that allow her to really show off that yes, she is the supreme commander of the Tau forces. And so it makes sense that her rules are as they are. But what would happen if we had a generic version of Shao Sun that wasn't a supreme commander, but really just strictly a stealth commander? And so let's start simple by just looking at kind of the bare bones of the profile and the weapons loadout. So if we look at Crisis commanders as a guideline for what a stealth commander might look like, really the difference is that the profile has 2 more wounds from the unit, right? So if we're comparing a Cold Star to Crisis Suits, we see 2 more wounds on the commander. So for a stealth commander, you would probably see something like this. Movement 8, Toughness 4, 3 up save, 4 wounds, Leadership 7, and 1 OC. Right? That's a pretty basic profile based on what we would expect given how other commanders work. As far as their weapons go, though, the thing about commanders is that they have, yes, more shooting because they're commanders, but they're not, one-man armies, really, right? So we don't want to see anything super outrageous. We don't want to see something that's really over the top. Now, in some cases, we do see quite a lot of output for things like cold stars, but that's not the lore of the stealth commander, right? The stealth commander would not be something that would be conceptualized as a damage dealer, as a glass cannon. It's there to lean into the stealth fantasy. And so what would that look like? We'd see maybe a modest bump, right? We're going for stealth, not damage, on their damage output. So maybe it has like an enhanced burst cannon, not a high output burst cannon, because that would be something special for the crisis suit, especially given the the larger chassis of the crisis commander battlesuit as opposed to a stealth battlesuit, right? So it makes sense that we see something that puts out a little bit more damage, but maybe doesn't put out as many shots. So here I'm suggesting 18-inch range as normal, 6 attacks up from 4, ballistic skill 3 because it's a commander, strength 5, -1 AP. I thought that might be a reasonable thing for a commander's one-off weapon to have that -1 AP and then 1 damage. But then I'm also giving it the option to pick a secondary weapon, and it either gets to pick between twin plasma blaster, which I'm saying is a twin linked, basically a plasma pistol, 6-inch range, 2 attacks, BS 3, strength 8, -3, 3 damage. So you get 2 really short distance plasma shots there, or a flamer, right? And I think both of those would be useful, nice little flavorful things to make the unit a little bit more punchy, but not insane. Things that make sense for a stealth commander to have, I think. They're more defensive, but improve the utility of the unit overall while not going too far into the really high output category. Where I think things get a lot more complicated is when we start thinking about the abilities that this stealth commander would have. And that's really the thing that makes, Cold Stars and Enforcers and Farsight and Shadow Sun all pop, right, is their abilities. It's not really even so much about their war gear, it's about their abilities. And this would be the same for a stealth commander too, right? So we could go in a bunch of different ways. One thing we might lean into really obviously is just make them stealthier, right? So what if the commander gave the unit lone operative? This could reflect the commander's kind of expert skill at being super sneaky, like super stealthy. And I think, lore-wise, this makes a lot of sense. Like if you have a stealth commander with it, like, yeah, they're just like that much better at being hidden. Maybe he has some special war gear that makes this happen or something like that, but the idea is that he has this ability that gives them lone operative. This would be really powerful for objective control and especially for guiding. One of the big things about stealth suits right now is their most important role in the game is as spotters, right? They're giving those rerolls to your whole army now, given the way that For the Greater Good works. And having a lone operative spotter like that would be really powerful. So much so that I think it might even be too good, right? Like it would be really hard to pass up taking 3 stealth commanders, one for each of your stealth suit teams, if this were the case. You'd really have to price these things really high for that not to be the case. And I think that would be a really hard landing to stick. So yes, I think that's really good, and it makes sense, but I think it might be a little bit too good. Another thing stealth suits do, of course, is board control, right? Being infiltrators, having stealth, these are things that allow them to have really good board control. So maybe we could lean into that a little bit by allowing them to compete better for objectives. What if the commander gave them +1 OC on objectives? This could reflect like the commander's improved ability to execute tactical maneuvers or things like that, and would make a 6-man unit much more appealing than it is right now. Right now 6-man units are kind of an efficiency thing, right? Because 3-man units are proportionally more expensive. So sometimes you might think, well, I'll just go with the 6-man because it's more efficient that way. But I think this is kind of a really boring ability, right? I don't think I would actually take this just for that. I would do something else for objective control. I don't think that this would really, sway me towards taking it. Maybe that's the sign of a good design. I don't know, that it would be kind of an optional playstyle thing and not something that would be clearly, really competitive or strongly advantageous, at least for this particular unit. But overall, it's a little boring, and I don't know if I would really be excited about that as a player. It would be good, yeah, but I think the unit would have to be pretty cheap in order to justify this. And then the last kind of thing I was thinking about would be that we could make the commander just make stealth suits sneakier. Not in terms of making them lone operatives so they can't be shot, but just help them be more mysterious, I guess, right? And so what if we just made them sneakier by giving them a redeploy if they had a commander with them, right? Like a pre-game wall of mirrors type thing where they're able to redeploy somewhere just because they're that confusing for the enemy. In terms of lore, we wouldn't really think about this as them redeploying, but it would be that they had made the enemy think they were somewhere that they were not. And so this could set up some nice infiltrator bait and switch during deployment. It could add another component to your cell suits that makes them useful in the game as a whole, but doesn't give them too much of a benefit in the individual battle rounds. So I think this is something that could be a really good kind of intermediate between like the really really powerful lone operative and then the maybe less powerful objective control option. So I think the sneakier way would be kind of the way that I would envision this data sheet coming together. All right, so let's put it all together in a data card here and see what we get. So I decided to call this an Echo Battlesuit. Whatever, you pick a name that works for you. First thing I thought, of course, was Stalker Battlesuit, but that's Shao Sun. So, yeah, whatever works, right? So we have Commander in Echo Battlesuit, Movement 8, Toughness 4, 3 up save, 4 wounds, 7 leadership, 1 OC. We have his ranged weapons, which are the Enhanced Burst Cannon, and then he picks either the Plasma Blast, Twin Plasma Blaster, or the Tau Flamer. And then Battlesuit Fists are the melee weapons, has keywords Infantry, Fly, Character, Battlesuit, Commander, and Echo Battlesuit. Just like you would expect. Abilities include Deep Strike, Infiltrator, and Leader. Faction is for the greater good, just like you would expect. And then the ability is Distortion Field. So when this model is leading unit at the start of the first battle round, before the first turn begins, you may redeploy that unit. And then it has the option to pick up either the Battlesuit support system or the weapon support system, just like your standard stealth suits do. And then this is the back of the card that shows exactly the same stuff that we just talked about and specifies that this model can be attached to a stealth battlesuit unit. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you like the Commander and Echo Battlesuit? Do you think this is something that you would want to play with? What would you change about it? How would you make it better? How would you make it worse? Let's have a conversation about it. This is just for fun, right? Like this isn't a prediction video, but this is just an idea, a thought exercise about what this might look like if it were to come to fruition. So this is my shot at that. Let me know what you think, and as always, happy wargaming.